Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got 10 NFL stars who could be on the move this offseason. Yes, it's always a little shocking when stars kind of move on from teams. However, some teams are just in a rebuild, and these guys could be traded for draft picks. So drop a comment which one is your favorite, and maybe which one that you think would just be crazy, and hit that subscribe button. And let's start it off here with number one. It is going to be Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. He really proved that he could be the wide receiver one, even when Tyreek Hill was hurt, and I think he's going to continue to do so. However, he drew a lot of interest at the deadline, at the NFL trade deadline, and I think teams like San Francisco or Washington, who have Super Bowl aspirations, would definitely come calling. I mean, you're probably losing Deebo Samuel from the Commanders, and he would be the perfect fit to pair with Terry McLaurin. Waddle could operate in the slot, but also outside. Those two would be a great complement. And for the Niners, you're one wide receiver away from being back to the Super Bowl, and the kind of combination of Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings just isn't going to cut it anymore. You need some alpha wide receiver status, and I think Waddle would pair well with George Kittle when he's back from injury, but you can't afford to keep giving Christian McCaffrey 400 plus touches while he's also being your de facto wide receiver one. And a sneaky dark horse team would be the Broncos. As Courtland Sutton continues to age, I think they would love to get a young wide receiver. However, I don't think it's too likely that the Dolphins would trade him in the same conference. However, I throw them in there because they have lots of draft capital and they're absolutely loaded at every position group, so Waddle would be a great upgrade. However, if you're the Dolphins, I totally get this move because you don't have a quarterback for the foreseeable future, so you might as well draft one in 2026 or 2027 and get a true wide receiver one with the same time frame in that same draft, and then you could really just build around the run game with Devon Achane instead of wasting the talents of Jalen Waddle. And then our next trade candidate is going to be Max Crosby, one of the most talked about guys throughout all of the NFL playoffs about where he'll end up. I know he did not like the tanking that the Raiders were doing. However, it got them the number one pick, and Fernando Mendoza might be able to turn around this team in year one. I love the hire of Clint Kubiak, but I'm not sure Max Crosby is in the kind of full belief that he can take them to the Super Bowl or even contend in the playoffs right away. And he is still at the top of his game, so a few teams to kind of make note of. He went to college in the state of Michigan, and he's mentioned playing for the Lions, so they have to be up there. He would pair perfectly with Aiden Hutchinson instead of them having to double him on every play, and Max Crosby lining up across from him would absolutely be terrors for opposing offensive linemen. So I think he would pair well for the Lions, who need to rebuild on the defensive side. And also, Mike Vrabel and this Patriots defense, why not stop them from getting another playmaker on the defensive line? Pair him with Barmore and Milton Williams, and then you're going to have immense pass pressure with Kayvon Chason, who he already played with in Las Vegas, and they have grown to be great friends. So that would another kind of potential landing spot. And then another one is going to be San Francisco, which, yes, a little bit unlikely. However, their defense was ravaged with injuries, and there's one thing John Lynch is not afraid to do. It's shell out draft picks for a top star. So I think he could definitely make this move if he thinks he has a contending roster. And whichever defensive coordinator takes this job for San Francisco would love to have Max Crosby to help with the leadership of this young group to hopefully get them back to how they were playing at the end of 2025 with limited resources. But Max Crosby could certainly be on the move, and I wouldn't be shocked if he commands even 1 to 2 first-round picks in return. And I think it's worth it for these teams that are consistently kind of picking at the back 10 picks of the NFL draft. I think this would take them over the top, and Crosby is such a great culture and leader of men, so I think he would fit with any team that trades for him, so it'll be interesting to see where he ends up this offseason. And then we go back to the offense here. It's going to be David Montgomery. The GM of the Lions had already mentioned that Monty could be on the trade block, and I think it makes perfect sense because the Lions are going to move forward with Jahmyr Gibbs. They're going to give him a big extension, which he deserves. However, if you're paying money and tying him down to this Lions offense, you might as well use him as a bell cow. They've always been in the committee. However, this past year it felt a little bit disconnected as Dan Campbell wanted to give Jahmyr Gibbs more work, but then you're only giving David Montgomery 5 to 10 touches, which is not the volume running back that he is. He usually needs 15 to 20 carries a game in order to really wear down a defense, and I think these three teams would absolutely love to have Monty. My favorite landing spot has got to be the Texans. I think he fits that DeMeco Ryans Houston Texans defense identity and bringing that to the offense where they could lean on the run game, which they so desperately needed in 2025, and allow CJ Stroud to kind of take a backseat and have someone to play off of in the run game. And then we go to the Saints and the Chiefs, who are both without running backs at this point. Alvin Kamara's on the back half of his career, and you could use a power running back and overall talent to surround Tyler Shuck while you try and contend in this division. And the Chiefs are the same way, with Isaiah Pacheco as an unrestricted free agent and others just kind of not playing up to par. Monty would be a proven winner that can get it done in the playoffs, which I think the Chiefs and Saints are both looking for as they hope to contend in the next year. And the Chiefs would also fit well with Andy Reid as he tries to recapture this rush pass kind of balance instead of having to throw on every single play. You got a big physical runner that can kind of free things up for this offense to play a little bit more loose in the pass game. So Monty would definitely be a great fit for all these teams listed. And then we've got A.J. Brown. Another guy similar to Max Crosby has been getting a lot of buzz in the trade block world. However, I've identified 3 teams being the Niners, Patriots, and Bills if they're able to get their hands on A.J. Brown. I think it's going to command a top dollar price because, let's be honest, the Eagles are going to be eating the cap space anyway. But it might be worth it in order to kind of remove the distraction from the locker room. I'm not saying A.J. Brown is the distraction, but all the news and rumors that happen every single week about swirling A.J. Brown is not happy, A.J. Brown needs to be traded. You can kind of have them all be wiped away if you trade and move on from him and really just try and reestablish the Saquon Barkley rushing identity that this Eagles offense had when they won the Super Bowl and not worry about forcing targets to your star wide receiver. But these teams can definitely use a star wide receiver, starting with the Bills, who are desperately needing some compliments to the 2 tight end set and Khalil Shakir. I think A.J. Brown would be perfect being the big body X wide receiver that could really get it done in the red zone, which is where the Bills have struggled recently in the playoffs and in other years. Just too much stress on Josh Allen with his legs and the rushing game in order to get it done in those tight yardage margins. And if you have a guy that can just go and run a fade and it's almost an automatic touchdown, I think it would help Josh Allen a lot in his development. And similar to that, Brock Purdy and Drake May could definitely use that development with A.J. Brown. I mentioned the Niners' lack of a wide receiver 1 with Jalen Waddle. But the Patriots find themselves in a similar place, with Stephon Diggs only getting older and Kayshon Boutte kind of just being more of the deep ball threat. You could have A.J. Brown running slants underneath and also to the boundaries. I think it would be the perfect kind of complement to Drake May's deep ball if they were to kind of go after A.J. Brown. He would be back with his former head coach, Mike Vrabel, which he speaks so glowingly of. And I think A.J. Brown would be a perfect fit for a new home outside of the Eagles locker room, and I think he would be a winner from day one and really help shift whichever wide receiver room acquires him. And then we got Joe Burrow. Do I think he's actually going to get traded? No, but there is a slight chance. And this could be done either this offseason or next because with the Bengals owner, they really don't like chefing out money year in, year out for a team that's not contending for Super Bowls. So I think the time could be coming to a close. And some teams that are definitely going to inquire for Burrow outside of all of the other known teams that need a quarterback. But 2 teams that actually make sense would be the Falcons and the Vikings. The Vikings, obviously, they have the chemistry with Justin Jefferson, his former college teammate. They won a national championship together, and I think they could really win a Super Bowl if he were to go to Minnesota. They have the defense to do so with Brian Flores and all of the auxiliary parts with a good, proven head coach. And same goes for the Falcons. I mean, they have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan, all the weapons at Burrow's disposal, and I think he could kind of cover up a lot of holes in that defense just based off sheer will and talent on the offensive side of the ball. Could win them lots of games, and they would pretty much be a lock to win the NFC South every single year if you're able to make this move and pull it off. But Joe Burrow on the big contract, I think it makes a little bit of sense if you're willing to move on from him. I mean, he's been so good, but this defense is so atrocious that they don't really have a chance in this division or even the playoffs. I think they got lucky in that second year, Burrow, but I think the magic might be running to an end, so his name could definitely be in trade circles this offseason. And then we got Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the prized possessions of the draft in the past few years. They thought he was going to be generational, and the jury's still out. I think he could still be a proven pro, but maybe not live up to the full expectations that people had. I think they were just way too high. Obviously, his dad was an all-time great, but maybe Marvin Harrison is just a step below that. But for the Cardinals' perspective, this kind of makes sense. You kind of get the opt-out in order to get some draft capital, build the rest of the roster, and you can really move around Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, and maybe you sign another free agent wide receiver, and you have plenty of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Beef up the draft capital, maybe work on the O-line, and then once you have your quarterback, he has enough to play with. So I think the Cardinals can make this move, and some teams that might be interested would be Tennessee and Cleveland in particular, and maybe Pittsburgh makes the call if they want to contend or maybe get their franchise wide receiver right now as DK Metcalf continues to struggle. But Tennessee and Cleveland I really like because they have top 5 picks, and maybe if they're not fully sold on Jordan Tyson or Mekhi Lemon or Carnell Tate, whoever they like, but maybe don't want to waste a top 5 pick on, you can probably get Marv for a second round pick or maybe a first. I'm not sure what his kind of compensation will be, but much less than the top 5 pick that they have in the 2026 NFL draft. And I think he pairs well with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or whoever the Cleveland quarterback is. You get a young quarterback and hope that they can kind of grow up together in the NFL. Give Marv a fresh start and hope that he can recapture all of that draft hype. I really like this move if it were to happen. And then a guy that I just mentioned here, it's going to be DK Metcalf. Some landing spots would be Carolina, Washington, and New Orleans. And one theme about this is that he would be the wide receiver 2 there. I think that's where he's at this point of his career. He had less receiving yards than Kenneth Gainwell, less receptions than Kenneth Gainwell. It was just kind of an off year for DK Metcalf. Some uncharacteristic drops, and even if Aaron Rodgers is back on the field for Pittsburgh, I'm not sure they're going to be contending for the AFC North anymore. They needed so much to go their way, and they kind of had their shot. And even with that, I'm not sure if Rodgers was the biggest fan of DK Metcalf, given his off-the-field issues down the stretch, but I think any of these teams would be lucky to have him as a wide receiver 2. Pair him with Ted McMillan or Terry McLaurin or Chris Olave, and I think you got a scary duo. He's one of the best red zone wide receivers and can take any slant to the house. He's super physical, and I think he would match up perfect to be the 1A, 1B. Instead of having to carry the whole offense by himself, I don't think at this point of his career he's capable of that. So any of these teams could definitely make a push for Metcalf. And then we got Jalen Ramsey, same team from the Steelers here. It actually might not be a trade. He could get cut this year, but these are 3 teams that could actually make the trade just to make sure that they lock down Ramsey instead of having him hit the open free agent market if he were to get cut. So I think teams really make sense if you're Dallas, Los Angeles, or Chicago. The Rams, obviously, Ramsey would be going back to them. He won a Super Bowl in Los Angeles. That makes a lot of sense. They could use the help on the back end. And 2 teams that really need help in the secondary, whether they play him at corner or safety. I know the Steelers mix him up a little bit towards the back half of the year. It's clear that Ramsey still has juice, and I think Dallas and Chicago, 2 teams on the rise that just need some more help and depth on the secondary. Why not bring him in, help mentor your young athletes on the back end, and he could still get it done in all the crucial moments. And he's been in all the big-time games, which as a team with young quarterbacks or inexperience in the playoffs, you need guys like that who know how to win these games. So I think Ramsey would be a crucial part of all 3 of these teams' future, and it'll be interesting to see if he is moved on from. And then we got DJ Moore, another wide receiver here. Some landing spots would be Tennessee, New Orleans, and Buffalo. I think DJ Moore is still capable of being a wide receiver 1 if it's in Buffalo or other teams that are needing of a wide receiver 1. DJ Moore, I mean, it just makes sense for Chicago because they have so many young weapons and you're able to save some cap room, get some draft capital, go into 2026 fresh. I know they've had some behind-the-scenes stuff with DJ Moore, whether it's kind of lack of effort. I'm not really sure what it really is. He was making timely plays down the stretch, but obviously bailing on some routes is not going to be the recipe for success for him going forward. But I think he wants an increased role. I mean, he really saw his usage go down as the season went along, and that's just due to the emergence of Luther Burden, and they already have Rome Odunze and Colson Loveland, so you have 3 weapons for Chicago, and I think DJ Moore might just be the odd man out. So why not just move on? It's a fresh start here. Go to a contending team. I know he isn't like the biggest winner after coming from Carolina, then to Chicago, and now they finally start winning. But I think he could help turn a young quarterback around at Tennessee or New Orleans, and I think he still has a lot of juice left in the tank. And then moving from one wide receiver to another is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. Yes, a lackluster 2025. However, the potential is so high. I mean, he was an absolute baller in 2024 down the stretch with Mac Jones. And I think the team that makes the best sense here would actually be the San Francisco 49ers because he is ready to win right now. And you match him up on Brock Purdy's timeline. 2 young studs in the NFL, and they're going to need some help early and often in 2026. With George Kittle probably missing the early part of the season, you get Brian Thomas Jr., pair him with Ricky Pearsall, and if they're able to stay on the field, they could be a dynamic duo in the wide receiver room, and that way you don't have to give Christian McCaffrey over 400 touches every single season. So I like Brian Thomas Jr. maybe going there. They would probably be happy and willing to give up a first-round pick. A late first-rounder is probably the draft capital that I think will take to get Brian Thomas Jr., But obviously teams like the Saints or the Panthers are always trying to evolve their wide receiver rooms, especially the Panthers with Bryce Young in year 5. You're going to have to make that decision on whether to pay him, so why not leave no room for interpretation, give him 2 good weapons, and if he can't do it, then you kind of move on. But if he can, you just know that you gave him the best chance possible. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. still has a lot to prove. I mean, this Jags wide receiver room kind of has given up on him, not really, but like trading for Jacoby Myers and extending him is a big slap in the face for the potential that they think they have in Brian Thomas Jr. You also have Parker Washington, who has great chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, and if they want to keep integrating Travis Hunter into this offense, which I know they've mentioned about doing so, I think Brian Thomas, it just makes sense to move on. If they're able to get the draft capital they're looking for, I think San Francisco is a team to watch out for, but he could go right back to being a top 10 wide receiver if so. And that is going to do it for the top 10 wide receivers, or not wide receivers, all NFL players, all stars that could be moved on from this offseason. Drop a comment which one was your favorite and maybe which one that you think will never happen. And let me know also which videos you want to see coming up in the NFL offseason. And feel free to hit that subscribe button. And that is going to do it. Peace.